Hello, Westford. My name is Ben Domaingue, Managing Editor here with Westford Community Access Television, and I'm joined by Westford resident Bill Taffel, who has proposed a citizens petition which aims to allow residents to vote on special town meeting and annual town meeting warrant articles without being physically present. Bill, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Ben. Shall I give a little background on myself?
Yeah, we'd love that.
Just about myself, I've lived in Westford since 1986 and have been on the Finance Committee and have generally been involved in a number of ways. And I've submitted citizen petitions before, and this particular petition is an idea which I have worked on for a good number of years, presenting several times in several different forums, and now I'm taking advantage of a chance to come before the town and present it to the whole town.
Absolutely. So can you tell me a bit about Article 10 on the Special Town Meeting Warrant?
Sure. The basic idea of this petition is to let people vote on warrant articles without having to physically attend the town meeting. As most people know, most of the key issues facing the town are resolved by these votes on warrant articles at the town meeting. But currently, you can't vote on them unless you're actually physically present. And that presents an obstacle to a lot of people for a variety of reasons, whether it be age or conflicts with work or conflicts with children or any one of a host of reasons. And so those people are then excluded from the decision-making process. And given that the town is now as large as it is, and that a lot of people actually want to have input on these issues but can't attend the town meeting, it seems like it would be a good time to modify the process so that people could actually vote on the warrant articles without attending the town meeting. And this requires change at the state level. It's not a change that Westford can make by itself. And so what this article does is it asks the select board to work with our state representatives, Jim Arciero and John Cronin, to get a bill into the legislature at the state level that would allow Westford residents to vote without attending their town meetings. And it doesn't specify exactly how that would occur, but there really are two basic approaches. One would be to hold what's the so-called hybrid meetings, where people can either attend physically or remotely and vote remotely. And the other one is would be to have the town meeting as usual, but don't vote on the warrant articles until subsequently, when they would be presented on a paper ballot at the polls. Either one of those, I think, would work. They have some advantages, disadvantages. But the gist of this article really is to get Westford into the discussion with the state about making this change, which is really long overdue.
Absolutely, and as I'm sure many of you know, back in October of 2023, we hit a record number of attendees at a special town meeting. And following that, in March of 2023, we yet again hit another record of annual town meeting attendees, where the town later had to reschedule the meeting to accommodate over 1,000 additional voters on the WA trustees field later in April, which is just incredible. But that number of voters, the approximately, I think, 2,500 voters that attended, is a little over 10% of the 18,000 registered voters, almost 19,000 registered voters in Westford.
Yeah.
Which is, suffice to say, incredible. But I even think if you wanted to have every registered voter in Westford attend town meeting, I don't even know if the Songus Center could accommodate that in Lowell, which is just incredible to think about. So following that, you had mentioned that, and correct me if I'm wrong, in your view, town meeting is inherently exclusionary because not everybody can participate, in your mind. Is that?
I think that's true. I think, just as an example, I think there are a lot of older people, of whom I am one, but who, for one reason or other, just cannot come to a meeting and sit all day long or sit even all evening long and listen to articles being talked about and vote. And all people really want to do is vote. So I think it prohibits a lot of people from being involved who would want to be involved. I don't think it does so intentionally. And one thing I would just like to point out, just up front, is that this is not at all a criticism of the way the town meetings have operated or of the moderator or anything like that. I think they've done a really remarkable job in the past couple of years of getting things together to be able to handle the size crowd that we've had. Typically, the problem in the past has been too few attendees at a town meeting. So you'll have 200 or 300 people at the meeting, and that's a tiny fraction of the town electorate. But I think what we've seen recently is issues that are particularly important to people may draw a lot of people to the town meeting, but they also probably raise the attention of a lot of people who can't come to the town meeting. And I think a good example being what we saw in the last meeting with the override budget being passed at the town meeting, but then resoundingly defeated at the polls. I think if you actually took the vote at the polls on these issues, you might see quite a different result from what you see in town meeting.
Mm-hmm. And just as a point of clarity, too, your citizen's petition is in no way trying to replace town meeting. You're just trying to...
No. There's no intent to get rid of town meeting at all. I think there is certainly a place for it, and I think there are plenty of people who have opinions and want to express them. And people may want to modify articles, or there I think are a lot of good reasons for having the town meeting. I just think it's not appropriate to require people to attend in order to vote.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I know the town has discussed this in the past, specifically with the Access to Town Meeting Committee, which is now defunct, but early in 2023 they had proposed several different ways in which residents could theoretically participate in town meeting without being physically present, some of which are being experimented in, I believe, Salem, New Hampshire, another of which is in the works in Wayland. Is there sort of a... I know you had mentioned there's sort of two different ways we could go about this, but in your mind, is there sort of an end game with how you would like to see this kind of play out if the town were to work with the state?
Well, what you mentioned raises two questions. One I would like to point out is that Westford is not the only town that is in this situation, and a number of towns have raised the issue. The town of Wayland has actually, for several years, has been working on getting a bill through the legislature which would allow them to have hybrid meetings. And if you actually look at bills in this legislature, there's countless bills whose title is Modernized Town Meeting. What they actually comprise isn't so easy to find out always, but nor is the status of these bills. But it's not a problem that's unique to Westford. As far as how it would end up in the end if you did this, I have my own personal preference, which would be, I think it would be a lot easier to implement, to have the town meeting as usual, but not hold the final vote on the warrant articles at that meeting, but have it subsequently at the polls. I think that could be implemented quite easily. I mean, all it really involves is printing up a paper ballot and then letting people come to the polls and tallying up the result. I think a hybrid meeting is a great idea, but I think it would be pretty hard to implement technically and would probably take a long time to get there. Whereas I think the approach of having the meeting and then of having a paper ballot vote, I think would be much more expedient. I also think there's nothing that says that you can't have a hybrid meeting and then have a ballot vote. But you know, there would be details to work out, and I don't want to jump the gun in a sense and try and define everything up front. I think the goal is clear. And I think there may be a number of issues which would pop up that would have to be sorted out. But I personally feel like any solution that we came up with is likely to be better than what we're doing now. What we're doing now is not perfect either and has its own problems. And so I don't think we can expect perfection, but I think we can expect a pretty significant improvement.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It seems like this proposal, your aim is really to increase equity and participation among voters, as it seems like a lot of folks that, despite it being the purest form of democracy, as they say, a lot of folks are essentially disenfranchised by, timing and not being
I think, and I looked this up, I wanted to find out how many people there were in town when the town meeting format was started. I couldn't find that out, but what I did find out was that the town meeting process was invented in the 1630s, shortly after the Pilgrims landed here, and that at that time, in the entire U.S. as it was then constituted, there were maybe a few thousand people of European descent to participate in these things across the whole country. So it couldn't have been too many in Westford. And I think if you look at the situation where the town hall used to hold the town meetings, how many people can you fit in the town hall, in the meeting room? Well, the meeting room's no longer there, but it would be a pretty limited number. And so I think there's the issue of the number of people, but I think also I think it's implausible to expect people to be able to attend a meeting like this for a host of reasons. I think one of the reasons is, two kind of recent reasons let me just raise. One is we've just had this COVID pandemic a little while ago. I think there continue to be a lot of people, particularly elder people, who would be very uncomfortable about sitting in a giant room with a whole bunch of people and subjecting themselves to whatever they might be subject to in that environment. And I think another one is that, as we've seen in recent meetings, they can get pretty volatile and pretty aggressive and pretty unpleasant to be at. And I think, and I've spoken to people who have been fearful at some of these meetings, and I don't think we should require people to be fearful in order to vote.
Yeah, can you go a little further on that as to what you're referring to? You believe there, might be some fear and some safety issues, fear and some safety issues regarding. I
think in general, not to be global here, but in the country as a whole, things have gotten pretty volatile. There are a lot of there's a lot of violence. There are a lot of shootings, random stuff going on, and from people that I've actually spoken to who attended these previous meetings, that have not felt safe, basically, and have not known what might happen. And I've talked to people who have moved near the door with their children so that they could get out in a hurry if they needed to, or people who wouldn't want to go to another meeting having been to one. And, I think it's an issue that can't really be ignored. But I think it's only one of a number of issues. I mean, even if that weren't an issue, I still think that people should be able to vote. We should make it easy for people to vote, not hard.
Absolutely. Now, what would you say to some folks who might argue, well, just this meeting is planned months in advance, like make time, just show up, it's not difficult. What would you say to that?
I don't think it is planned months in advance, and that would be true for some people, but it certainly wouldn't be true for every people. I think, just to take an example, people who work, I know when I had a full-time job, I traveled a lot. There were, my schedule wasn't necessarily my own. I did have to work and earn a living, and I couldn't necessarily call the shots. So whether I could be available for a particular meeting or not depended to some degree on my work schedule. And you have the same thing, I think, for people who have children who are in a lot of activities these days where they need to be shepherded to them. Somebody has to be with them. And so maybe one parent could attend the meeting, but not the other. I don't think the advanced preparation of the meeting solves a lot of the problems that exist.
No, I understand. Now, I want to kind of circle back. So for those of you who don't know, this is a citizen's petition, so this was not placed on the warrant by any board or committee. This was placed on after garnering enough signatures from residents. For annual town meeting, typically it's 10 or more signatures to place a citizen's petition on a warrant. I believe for special town meeting, it's 100. So you had to get at least 100 residents on board with this idea who agree with it. Can you tell me a bit about your experience with that?
Just to give a thumbnail sketch, around the time of maybe the last town meeting, there was a lot of noise on Facebook, which I rarely look at, but which I happen to look at, about this very issue. You know, the town meeting needs to be modernized. You need to be able to vote without having to go to it. And so I created a website to provide some information on what was going on in that regard, and also to collect names of people who were interested. And collected a whole bunch of names. Some well over 100 people subscribed to the website to be notified. And when it came to actually writing the petition, we prepared the petition, and some number of those people participated in getting signatures. And just as an example of I think how receptive people are to this idea, my wife and I stood out in front of Market Basket for one afternoon for about 3 hours, and we collected in that one bit of time about 50 signatures. So there's plainly a lot of interest in the town among citizens. So while the 100 signature threshold at first seemed kind of daunting, it was not too difficult to achieve, which I think is a measure of the level of interest in this kind of a solution.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think garnering, more than 100 signatures, we think back to previous town meetings. I mean, I think in my time here, the most I've seen has been, save for last year, I don't want to call them anomalies, but in general, it's been 400 to 700. So that's a pretty substantial percentage if you think on the average of town meetings of who participates, how many folks are interested in this.
Yeah, if that actually. I first raised this issue in, I think, 2015, and at that time I looked at the history of town meeting attendance versus attendance at the polls. And attendance at the polls was, generally speaking, about 5 times the attendance at town meeting. It was still a relatively low percentage of the total registered voters, but still 5 times the attendees at town meeting. And so I think there's a lot of room for getting more participation involved. I'd also, on a slightly different topic, comment that back in 1997, the Massachusetts Moderators Association did a study which at that time was focused on how to get more people to come to town meeting because so few people came. And they came up with a list of issues as to why people didn't go to town meeting. And that list of issues, despite whatever efforts have been made, again, not to criticize those efforts, but despite those efforts, the same problems still exist as existed in 1997. So it's now 27 years later, and that seems like enough time to decide to go in a different direction.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And as a young voter, one of the things I think about this is being in Westford has been my first foray into town meeting. I'm a resident here. I work for the Community Access Station. Is how much more convenient the last 4 years since the pandemic that ballot voting has gotten. But town meeting has always been, I need to attend on this day and stay for an undisclosed amount of time. It can really vary to vote on, X, Y, and Z articles. Whereas now, I think looking forward to the presidential election, I think early voting starts in the next week.
Yeah.
And it runs pretty much every day through November 5th, save for a few right before the election. But it's become a lot more convenient. You don't even have to leave your house. You can mail your ballot now too, which is incredible. So
Yeah.
It's a lot more convenient in that regard.
Yeah, I think so. I think there are a lot of ways that you could get around the problems that we're having today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'm looking at a folder in your hand. Is that now when we go to town meeting? How do you plan to make your case?
Well, here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow night at the selectmen's meeting, I will present this article to the select board, I should say. And they will need to decide. It's on the warrant. It's on the warrant simply by virtue of getting the required number of signatures. But the select board will need to decide whether or not to support this article. Usually the Finance Committee has a recommendation. I have to say, I think from the finance perspective, given the recent costs of accommodating people at the town meetings, which have not been insignificant, that a paper ballot vote at the polls could well be a lot less expensive than the extra accommodations that need to be made for the town meeting. But then there is a League of Women Voters preview of the articles. I don't recall exactly the date, but that will be held and will be, I think, televised on WestfordCAT, and people can attend. And then at the town meeting itself, I will, as I understand it, this has happened before, I will get up and make a presentation explaining the article, and then there will be discussion from the floor, and then there will be a vote. And we'll see what the result is. But this article, as it's currently scheduled, is at the end of the town meeting. So people should be aware that they need to come and stay for the whole meeting. I have been advised by the moderator that, first of all, there are 10 articles on the town meeting. There were 17, so the number was substantially reduced. So this article went from 17 to 10, which seemed like a big improvement. But then there may also be some articles that are combined into a consent decree, consent vote, I forget exactly what it's called, but consent agenda, so that they can all be voted on at once. So it may not take as long to get to the end of the meeting to get to this article as it might. In any event, I don't think it should be too long. There isn't that much going on at this meeting, so the first article I think is probably contentious, but if we get past that one, I think we should have no trouble getting to this one.
Absolutely. And just for a point of clarity, the select board meeting you're referring to is tomorrow, so that's Tuesday. The League of Women Voters Special Town Meeting Warrant preview will be broadcast on WestfordCAT on October 17th at 7 p.m. It's being held via Zoom as well, just so folks are aware and are curious. And the Special Town Meeting will be held on Monday, October 21st at 7 p.m. at Westford Academy. Check-in begins at 5:30 p.m., just so folks are aware they're pushing that up a little bit if you plan to attend the meeting. And this year's meeting includes, as you had mentioned, 10 articles, including Article 1, which is referring to a firearms business bylaw that's will be presented first, along with a few other zoning bylaw amendments that would add additional uses into Westford's zoning bylaws, along with this citizens petition, which hopes to compel the select board to work with the state to allow for remote participation at future town meetings. Well, Bill, I think we really covered a lot of ground. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Well, I think I would just like to add that I've worked on this since 2015. It would really be gratifying for myself, but also I think for the town as a whole and the other people I've talked to. I used to volunteer at the senior center, and I talked to a lot of people there who just can't get to the town meeting and would appreciate being able to vote without having to attend. So I think the article does not get rid of town meeting. It's sort of supplements town meeting, and I think its passage would benefit the whole town and the whole governing process of the town. So I hope people come to the meeting and vote in favor of the article.
Absolutely. And just as a reminder to Westford residents watching this, the deadline to register to vote for special town meeting is October 11th at 5 p.m. That is the deadline. You have to register 10 days before the meeting, or any election for that matter. Well, Bill, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate the opportunity to try and get the word out to more people. So thanks for scheduling me in here.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Much appreciated.